Welcome back. So in this video, I wanted to talk about creating a roughness map for our creatures. So this is my guy so far, and if I rotate the camera, not the camera, the environment, you can sort of see the light hit it in a different sort of way, and how the light sort of reacts to particular parts of the body. Now, with my creature, I wanted it to be pretty consistent all the way through, except for the face where I wanted a little bit more shine to it. So having it a little bit more greasier, I should say. So when I'm working on skin, I guess, when I think about the roughness map, I'm also thinking about the greasiness of the skin. So hopefully you can see that. Okay, so let's get into it. So I'm going to go back to paint mode, and I'm just going to change the environment map. So what I like to do is to change it to Tomoko Studios. I think this one is the best for just painting. And often when you're working with these maps, it's sometimes hard to see, especially like under here, because the map is linked to the world. Now, if you change the environment map alignment to camera, it'll be sort of stuck to the camera. So you can sort of see if I reduce the opacity, it's just aligned to the camera there. Reduce the blur, and let's see. Yeah, that should be alright. So you can see that and sort of see the differences there. Still stuck to the camera in a way. I still don't really know how it works, to be honest. All I know is that when you do that, you get a sort of light on the front of the camera, which is nice. And that's kind of how you want to work. You want the light to be sort of lit up evenly. And you can still rotate the camera if you need to. Not the camera, the light. So if you need some areas to be a little bit more lit up, you can do that. But this is nice because you can sort of see everything. So the roughness pass, let's take a look here. So I have a folder, and this is sitting at the really top. Now it's important when we're working with the roughness, we work in the correct sort of material layer. So roughness is what we want to work in. If you do this in base color, you're gonna still see what you're doing, but it's not. Some things just don't work the same. Like if you're going to add like a generator or something like that, it might not feel the same because you're working on the base color, not the roughness. So make sure we change that to roughness. And what I'm going to do is show you what I've done. So I normally start off with some sort of base, right? And the base is very similar to how I would do something like this. It sometimes can consist of a number of different layers, depending on what I'm doing. But in this case, I just have one. Now, if I come to the viewport, drop down here and change it to roughness, you can see what that roughness looks like. So you can see that it's pretty sort of cloudy, right? The type of brush that I'm using here is the Cement 1, right? So in this brush, when we're working, you want to go all the way to the bottom and turn off color. Just have roughness turned on. Now, I'll create a new layer just so you can sort of see what we're doing. So if I go back to material and I zoom in, black will be 0 roughness, so it'll be quite shiny and glossy. I sort of paint there. I'll use a different brush because this cement brush has a sort of an opacity to it. So you can see it's this sort of really shiny, wet look. As I rotate the light, you can sort of see that react. And in the layer for the roughness, you can see it's just a pure black. So going back to the material, if I paint in all white, it means that it's completely rough. So we're going to have this very matted look. So you can see if I rotate the light around, you can see how around here the light is sort of reacting to that change, or the roughness is reacting to that change. Whereas over here, because it's pure rough, it's not really being affected at all. And this is what it looks like in the channel. So again, how I go about doing roughness for like a skin surface is think about the sort of greasiness, and the cement one works really well for this. So if I go back to my roughness channel, I can paint like a sort of darker color, somewhere around here. Start off there, and you can sort of start painting, and I'll turn this one off for a sec. Sort of start painting this sort of cloudiness. You don't want it to be a solid color, just like the base that we did down here. If you make it a solid color, it just becomes really artificial looking. Now I like to coat everything with this, and if you need to work with your opacities slider up here, then just do that. I tend to have it fairly low, but not as low as down here in the 10-15%. Somewhere around here should work really nicely for the cement brush. Now I normally coat everything in a sort of base roughness that I like, and I'll take a look at this in the viewport as well. So if I rotate the light around, I'll take a look at how that light is sort of reacting to that skin to see if it's looking the way that I want it to look. Now I think that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to continue coating this model with this sort of cloudy roughness. And this is just the base, so you can do more to it. All right. Quite often I'll just start off with something like this with a fairly large brush just to give it a coat of this roughness. And of course, think about the model that you're working with. If you have more of a aquatic sort of creature, then the roughness will probably be pretty low, much lower than this, where it's like really sort of shiny in a way. This creature is more of like a savanna / almost desert type dwelling creature, so something like in the African continent. So it's going to have more sort of rougher skin, right? So I'll do something like this, and I'm not too worried about some parts being a bit too darker. If I am finding that some areas are a bit too patchy, I'll just come in with a lighter sort of roughness and just sort of go over it, blend that back in, right? And I can do this as much as I need to until it starts looking the way I want it to. Of course, it's important to check it out in the material view. So you can just sort of see along the chest how that light is sort of reacting to that skin. And I like the way it looks so far. Now with the face, I tend to spend a bit more time on the face. I'm going to change this to free rotation because I'll sort of like that a lot better in a way. And what I'm looking for is like the grease on the face. So I might use a smaller brush at this point and then just start playing around with some of the levels here. So I might go down to a darker sort of shade here. Just think about the grease on the face. That's how I think about it. You guys can have your own way of thinking about it, but I think that works pretty well for me. And then I start coating this area a bit more, think about it a little bit more than just this sort of coat that you're throwing on. make sure you look at it as well in the material view. I'm just going to take this intersection off. And again, you want to hold down shift and right click to sort of rotate that light around that particular area because you want to see how that's sort of reacting. I think I could go a bit more shinier, to be honest. Okay, so like on top of the sort of eyebrow bone, want that to be a bit more shinier. And sort of along where the sort of cheeks would be. So a little UV issue that I'm going to fix in post. So ignore that. Okay, a little bit more greasier in the ears, maybe. And let's take a look at it. Cool, and I sort of like the way that's looking. You can see on top of the eyebrow bone over here, you can sort of see the light reacting to that. And I like the way that sort of looks. Now I can come into here and then make some parts a little bit more rougher. So kind of like over here under the eyes where I would probably think with this darker sort of pigment, maybe it's a little bit more rough around here. So I might come in with a sort of whiter color and just clean that up a bit, make it a little bit more like rougher skin, tougher sort of skin. Especially on these parts here, these little warty parts, I expect them to sort of be quite dried out. So I'm going to rough them up and make that pretty white. And then over here as well. Just make that nice and white so it's rough looking compared to the rest of the sculpture. Okay. Well, getting lost a bit. So I just changed, I was working on a Cintiq. So I needed to increase the rotation amount. So I'm just going to bring that all the way down to 1 where it was. And that should help a lot. Okay, so that's a lot better. Okay, so let's see where we're at. Got to sort of reset the view. Alright, so let's take a look at this in the render view. Remember, I've just turned everything off of what I've done. And I'm just going to take a look at it in the render view to see how it looks in a more accurate lighting. And again, you don't want to base everything off this because we are going to be rendering inside Arnold Maya, and it's going to look different. But I'm sort of looking at what I've done so far, and his overall body is probably a bit too shiny. Kind of looks like he has this layer of grease all over him. But I do like the face and how that's looking. Let's see. Kind of like the levels of shininess there. Maybe it's a bit much. But let's work with that. I think that looks pretty good. So going back to here, once you finish your base, and you probably want to spend a bit more time on this than I have. You can see in my base here, it's a bit more smoother. Some parts are a bit more well thought out. So like on the belly, I wanted that part to be a bit more rougher because this creature would be on 2 legs, but often he'll be on the ground still. So I expect his belly area to be a bit more rough. And you can see that the work I've done is a bit more blended than the other one. You can see I spent a bit more time on the face as well. Same sort of idea on the eyebrow bone. It's a bit more shinier. The general parts of the face is shiny. And I made this shiny. Maybe I'll go back in and make that not shiny, because I don't think this part here should be glossy or wet looking or greasy looking. I would say that this part here would be fairly rough, considering it's still sticking out, right? I'll do the same for this little one here. Okay, so once we've done our pass, and I'm going to keep this one up. So once we've done our sort of base roughness, and we're sort of happy with it, we can move on to something a bit more detailed. So I've created a peaks pass, and if I press C to go back to roughness, now pressing C will just jump to the last single channel that you've viewed. Before I was looking at roughness, so when I press M to go back to material and press C, it's going to go to roughness. If I was in base color, press M for material, C will go back to base color. So I'm in the roughness, and let's take a look at the peaks. So I figured that the peaks of this creature will be a little bit more drier, right? So I'm using the same sort of method down here, where I create a paint layer, and in that paint layer, I think I used sorry, let's take that back. So I copy the base, so duplicate that, bring that up top, and then I use a HSL generator. So up here, add generator, and using this HSL to increase the lightness. So increasing the lightness will increase the roughness of this levels. So if I right click this and toggle the mask, turn that off, it's just brightening everything up. But what I like about this method is that parts that are already lit up or parts that are darker will have that consistent lift in the HSL brightness settings. So if I just brighten this up, everything will brighten up evenly. So parts that were darker before will be a little bit darker still. Parts that were more lit up will be even more lit up. So doing that, if I press M on the keyboard, you can see that it is very rough. So we've lost all of that sort of shininess that we had, which is fine. The important part with this, though, is that if we're going to create a new layer for our roughness, we need to change the blend mode to pass through. And what that would do is that it would still consider what's below, right? If we just created a normal layer, you can sort of watch that load. What it would do is that it will just sit directly over the top of what you've done and cover anything up. So think of it like a multiply blend mode, where it will take both of the layers or the layers underneath, and it will sit on top of it. So you can see that this is just what I had. And going to the pass through will make it sort of sit on top of this layer that's below. So bring that up as well. Okay, so once that loads, you can sort of see the belly there. It's where I had it lit up in the base, so it's sort of sitting on top now. And with this, what you want to do is then add a mask. So you want to add a black mask, so it gets rid of everything, and then add an effector and a paint layer. Or no, you want to add a generator, and the generator I'm adding is the dirt one, because I think the dirt is really good for hitting the cavities or peaks, and it does a good job at that. So if I turn that back on, just let that load. And I have this set to inverted, so it's hitting the peaks, right? So the parts that are that have been shown are these parts here, right? So if I come back into the materials and sort of rotate the light and see if I can get a better angle here, what it does is that it just makes these parts pop out a bit more. See if I can find another part here. And I'll change the lighting to world again. So you can see how the light's reacting differently to the cavities as well as the peak, and it should be a subtle effect. It shouldn't be so obvious. But all those little things add a lot to the final look. Now I think I have this actually as opposite. So I have it as peaks, but I think I'm hitting the cavities. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes when you're working in this mode and you're using masking to remove things, but I'm pretty sure I'm hitting, well, I'm hitting both really. So you can see the dark parts are getting darker, which are the cavities, and then the peaks are getting rougher. So the parts that sort of stick out are being roughed up, and the parts that go in are getting a little bit more shinier, but it's sitting on top of what I've done before. So you can see the belly is still sort of lit up, which is quite nice. And that overall gives you a pretty good look for this final touch. Again, the roughness is going to look quite different when we take it into substance from this view here, but it's always nice to sort of look at it with more of an accurate lighting. But you can sort of see over here is a little bit more shinier, probably a little bit too much, I think, but I can adjust that quite easily back in here. So if I wanted to, I can adjust the HSL perceptive and reduce that down a little bit or increase that. In here, I can also come into the dirt levels or contrast or any of these settings to make that to change the values there. I can also change the levels of this dirt mask just by playing around with this slider. And if I bring it back to that, you can sort of see how I can really have a lot of control over that final look, which I find really helpful. Let's see if I can adjust this to make it a little bit more. Don't want it to be so contrasty, so maybe somewhere around there. And we'll take a look at this. Great. I like the look of this. And you know, you can take this as far as you need to with the roughness. You can add a couple more base layers to this if you want to sort of fine tune some areas. If you wanted to really work on the crevices a little bit more and make that light up a bit, then you can do that. One thing to note is not everywhere will be lit up on your model. So I haven't done a pass on the toes. They look pretty good, or on the fingernails as well. They look pretty good. I don't want them to be shiny at all. So they should be more or less fairly white. But I'll probably do another pass on these fingernails to sort of lighten them up a bit. You can see this part is a bit darker, which means it's going to be a bit shinier, which I don't want. But yeah, that's it with this one. I hope it helps, and I'll see you guys in the next one.